What is the most bizarre unsolved disappearance you can think of? My uncle had a child outside of his marriage. For 5 years, he supported his son and saw him on holidays. Then one day, the boy's mother suddenly moved 3 states away. She contacted my uncle just to let him know where they were now living. Wanting to surprise his son for his 5th birthday, my uncle booked a flight and went to visit. But when he arrived, the boy's mother told him she had decided to put the child up for adoption. My uncle was furious. He demanded to know who had adopted his son and where he could find him. She brought out some paperwork from a local attorney's office and told my uncle that the attorney himself had adopted the boy and had paid her a large sum of money in the process. My uncle tried calling the number on the documents, but it was disconnected. So he went to the office in person only to find the place completely empty. When he took the documents to the police, they told him no one by that attorney's name had ever practiced law in that state. That was over 30 years ago. My uncle has been searching for the man and his son ever since. But there hasn't been a single lead. Even the boy's mother regrets what she did and has been trying to find them, too. But it's like they vanished into thin air. If you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to subscribe for more. Asha Degree. 9-year-old girl gets up in the middle of the night in the dead of winter, gets dressed, and packs a backpack and takes off on foot. She was seen walking along a highway in the dark in the rain by multiple drivers. One of them tried to stop her and she ran off into the woods. The following year, her backpack was found wrapped in a trash bag and buried at a construction site. There was a nightgown and a book from her school's library, neither of which her parents recalled being in her possession when she went missing. The whole thing is just so bizarre. Back in the 60s before I was born, my mom's cousin disappeared. She was 26, had 4 kids, and was single. Her mom was over to her house visiting my cousin and her to sit with the kids while she walked to the corner store to get a pack of cigarettes. The corner store was 2 blocks away. They lived in a small town. She left the house in the middle of the day and by dark still hadn't returned. Her mom went looking for her age. Couldn't find her. The family searched and the people at the store said she never stopped there at all. They called police and reported her missing. They searched for her and she has never been found to this day. I have 2 relatives who have gone missing. The first is my mom's cousin Sandra, who has a few serious mental health issues. She went to work one day in the 80s and just didn't come home. She worked her whole shift, clocked out, then vanished. She was gone for about 6 years. One day, her mother, who was also her caretaker, came home from work and found the door broken. Sandra was sitting on the couch crying. She was perfectly fine, just crying. No one has ever brought it up to her because of her mental health issues. The other is my cousin Ryan. His father and my father were brothers, and when my uncle died, we sort of fell out of touch with Ryan. His mom remarried and somehow my sister ended up becoming good friends with our cousin's half-brother. Anyway, Ryan came up in conversation and the half-brother explained that they hadn't seen him in a while. Ryan had been into heroin but had just completed rehab and everything seemed to be going well for him. They filed a missing person report and everything. There's this creepy video of him walking out of a store. I think it was his job and a car pulling up and talking to him. He keeps shaking his head no and trying to walk away, but they follow him and eventually he gets into the car. It's really scary to watch. He's been gone for about 3 years. I was in my early 20s. A very close friend of mine disappeared in my Northern California hometown. She and her husband were going through a divorce and custody battle over their toddler daughter. He was an abusive man. Knocked my friend around a lot and stalked her and her new boyfriend after they separated. If I can't have her, no one can. He kept a creepy journal with writings like 11 p.m. drove by. Boyfriend under car in driveway. He spent the night. My friend told several people they were meeting for dinner to discuss the divorce, and he says they went back to his house because he had to get some papers. Said he dropped her off at her apartment afterward, but there is no evidence of that. She was never seen again that night. Social security number, credit cards, never touched. I believe she never made it out of his house alive. He knew all the back roads in the area as he was an outdoorsman and had employee access to the area. We believe she is probably buried. It was a high-profile case at the time and he was charged with her murder, went to trial and acquitted. Nobody cases are really so tough to take to trial, and I think the young assistant DA still regrets not holding off on charging him until they had more on him. There was loads of very damning circumstantial evidence, most of which was never presented to the jury as he had a top, now pretty famous, defense attorney. That was in 1990, and she still has not been recovered. Her friends and family have a pretty good idea what he did with her, but cannot get access to the area, an open space preserved behind private land. Ellie was so sure her husband murdered her that they consider the case closed, even though it is anything but for those who loved her. They don't want to waste their energy when double jeopardy applies. He was granted full custody of their child after his trial ended, something I think was part of his motivation. Moved to the backwoods and oddly enough was apparently a model father. I don't think he's had so much as a speeding ticket since 1990. My cousin, who is older than me by maybe 10 years, went missing a year ago in Russia. I currently live in Norway, but him and the rest of my family lived in a very small and rather isolated Russian town. It appears that he just left his apartment to go get cigarettes. His car keys were at home. Large sums of money were at home. License and other stuff you'd usually take with you if you were leaving were home. He was really close with his mother, my aunt. So, he called her the evening he went missing. He was just hanging out with his friends and had gotten home. The police looked and found nothing. It's a really small town and everyone knows everyone, so honestly, they didn't do much to look for him. It's really common for people, especially young men, to go missing and it's not seen as big of a problem as it should be, unfortunately. Anyway, a year goes by and my aunt calls his phone almost every day. She's kind of sentimental and hopeful. I guess if I had a son go missing, I'd be the same way. The phone obviously goes straight to the operator every time she calls until one day she calls and the phone is picked up by some kid. My aunt keeps the kid on the line and tries to keep calm enough to ask him some questions. Apparently, the kid's grandmother found the phone in a city that's maybe 9 hours away by car. The thing is, if you don't use a number in Russia for a year, it's disconnected. So, this is all really weird. She gave the info to the police, but honestly, they don't give a no body has been found. No other info available. I miss my cousin. He was really cool. We were close, and Icky just can't be dead. One of my grandpa's brothers moved from Tennessee to California and disappeared. He had given them an address before he moved and then he sent them a telegram with an updated address. But after a while, the letters to him would be returned to the sender. My great-grandfather called out there once to the landlady of the house and she told him that my great-uncle had moved. We assume it wasn't anything nefarious. He probably just changed his name because we've never been able to turn anything up in the searches. Another one of my grandpa's brothers had a son go missing on a hiking trip. It took several months for him to be found, but he had gotten lost in a sudden snowstorm and died of exposure. I was friends with a woman whose uncle really did go missing and remains missing still. He had a scourge out in the country and was going out to mow his fields. For some reason, he never actually unloaded the mower and neighbors saw him riding off on his ATV. He waved and smiled at them. Some days later, the police found his ATV several miles from his land, but nothing of him has ever been found. The two most popular theories are bears and that he might have fallen into something shady and someone took him like maybe wherever he was going. He was planning to meet someone, maybe for a payment, and something went wrong. I'm more inclined to believe the latter theory, as generally bears don't swallow people whole, and it's been a decade and literally not even his sunglasses have been found. My father went missing 28 years ago. He was an outdoors guy and everyone assumed that someone had been in contact with him. It wasn't unusual for him to go off alone. One day I received a call from his bank saying he hadn't touched his accounts in months, which was very unusual for him. In a panic, I tried to call him, but his number was no longer in service. I then called the RCMP, who asked me how old he was. I replied, 49. And they told me he was a big boy and could take care of himself. We just sort of assumed he was off in nature and left it at that. I would have kept pushing, but my family told me I was overreacting and needed to let it go. Fast forward for more months. A friend of my father's was trying to find a buyer for his houseboy. Apparently, my dad was supposed to be living there. The buyer came to check out the boat, but no one was there, and it was clear no one had been there in ages. My father's friend called the RCMP, and the case was finally opened. 9 months since he was last heard from, and for months since I had tried to open a case. By then, of course, it was a cold case. I cannot begin to describe how angry I am that no one took this seriously. All these years later, I still have no idea if he was murdered, had an accident, took his own life, or just walked away. Though he's listed with Interpol, and police say there's no record of him leaving the country, so that's that. I basically had to learn to deal with the trauma on my own with no support from my family or the police. Annie Bridget McCarrick, my college friend who moved from New York to Ireland permanently after falling in love with Dublin during a semester abroad there. She has been missing since March 1993. At first, it was thought she might have been the first victim of an Irish serial killer, but recently an Irish cold case TV show featured her and generated a ton of new leads, which the police are following up. Sadly, she was her parents' only child and they wound up divorcing over the loss. Her dad has since passed away, but her mom flew from Long Island to Ireland to talk to the TV people. She is quoted as saying she assumes Annie is dead and now just wants the closure of a body to bury. The official story is that the ship capsized during a storm. Most of the crew drowned and many of their bodies were lost due to the turbulence and chaos caused by the weather. But then there's the conspiracy theory. This version claims the ship was intentionally sunk, possibly hit by a missile. According to the theory, several crew members managed to escape before the vessel went under, and some of them were captured and held in a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. American divers investigating the wreck determined that at least one of the ship's large lifeboats had been launched and there was evidence of a failed attempt to launch a second. The divers also took film footage that was later viewed by the mother of one of the missing crew. She noted that a crack in the hull appeared to be a 48 inches wide hole that had been punctured inward, suggesting that the rig may have been struck by something that exploded. In 1984, reports emerged from Southeast Asia claiming that between 6 and 12 survivors of the Glomar Java Sea were being held in P camps in Vietnam. One Vietnamese refugee said he had seen American crewman John Pierce among the prisoners. Douglas F. Pierce, John's father, reported that the refugee claimed to have seen his son along with 5 other Americans and 8 Chinese men being brought into a prison in Daeong, the same prison where the refugee himself was once held. According to the refugee, John Pierce even gave him his father's business card and 2 sticks of gum. When the U.S. government got involved, they ultimately concluded the refugee was lying in an attempt to extort money from the Pierce family. Still, rumors persist. Supposedly, some officials have let details slip at cocktail parties, subtly hinting that there may have been a cover-up to avoid reigniting tensions with Vietnam so soon after the war. Of course, the simpler explanation is that there was no missile, no kidnapping, and no secret P camps holding the crew of an American drill ship. I should also add that as far as I can tell, no one has ever claimed to have seen anyone resembling our missing engineer in one of those supposed camps. Out of the 45 missing crew members, even the most generous conspiracy theories only suggest maybe a dozen made it out alive. But here's the weird part. My family has known about this theory since the mid-80s. My dad was once talking in a bar about the tragedy of the capsized ship when a stranger approached him and told him this exact story, every detail. Years later, he passed it on to me. My dad's always been a chatty drinker, and I decided to dig into it. To my surprise, I was able to verify every single part of what this random guy told my dad that night just by reading what's available online. I have no idea who that man in the bar was or why he decided to share all this with my father, but it's kind of eerie that someone with such detailed knowledge of this relatively obscure theory just happened to be there and chose to spill it all. Maybe the real mystery isn't the ship or the missing crew. Maybe it's the stranger who knew so much and why he felt the need to tell my